Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner.
In our top story, the European Union is considering punitive measures to dissuade Israel from building homes for its citizens. A collection of senior EU foreign ministers gathered last week to discuss ways to pressure Israel into canceling its plan to build 3,000 new residential properties in the capital and in the heartland of the Jewish state. The panel met to consider a range of possibilities, including punitive measures against Israel if the Jewish state moves forward with the building project. The European Union is one of Israel's biggest trading partners, and punitive measures could damage Israel's import and export markets.
Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas continues to stonewall Israel, refusing to hold peace talks unless Israel meets preconditions which the Jewish state considers to be unreasonable. Abbas recently stated that the only way to jumpstart negotiations would be for Israel to agree to a 6-month construction freeze, adding that there could be feasible negotiations if the Jewish state agrees to remove its citizens from their homes in Judea, Samaria, and areas of Jerusalem, halt all future construction, and release Palestinian security prisoners from Israeli jails. Jerusalem continues to insist that negotiations must be held without any preconditions, and that by making unreasonable demands, the PA is merely attempting to avoid direct talks.
The Islamic Jihad terrorist organization has threatened to violate the ceasefire with Israel. Israel recently prohibited the group's leader, Ramadan Shalach, from entering Gaza, saying that it would be a violation of the ceasefire agreement. In response, an official from Islamic Jihad said his group would not honor the ceasefire as long as their leader was banned from the Gaza Strip.
Exiled Hamas terror leader Khalid Mashal made his first visit to Gaza, during which he publicly called for the destruction of Israel. At a rally of nearly 500,000 cheering Palestinians to mark the 25th anniversary of the founding of the terror organization, Mashal promised to conquer Israel inch by inch. He vowed that the Palestinians will not stop until all of the land is taken from the Jews, and he promised that armed resistance would continue until Jerusalem has been liberated. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu expressed shock that the international community largely responded in silence to Mashal's hate speech, saying that Israel refuses to accept that the world has no problem finding its voice when Jews build homes in their ancient capital of Jerusalem. But when Palestinian leaders openly call for the destruction of Israel, the one and only Jewish state, the world remains utterly silent.
Ministers of the Arab League have decided to give the PA a monthly stipend of $100 million. This comes after PA leader Mahmoud Abbas appealed to the panel, saying that the Palestinian Authority was on the verge of collapse. Notorious for misappropriation of funds and corruption, the Palestinian Authority has often stiffed public workers on their monthly salaries, causing them to strike. Abbas told the Arab leaders, "We are in a collapsing state now. We cannot pay our salaries." The Palestinian Authority is now in debt to the Israel Electric Corporation for more than $190 million. The company has been appealing to the Israeli government to intervene in the economic crisis since the beginning of the year. Israel did implement a punitive measure against the PA after the United Nations granted implicit recognition of Palestinian statehood in November. A portion of the tax revenues earmarked for the PA has been paid toward the mounting debt to the Israel Electric Corporation. But that amount is so great that the proceeds covered less than 37% of the total bill.
Israeli security has released troubling data on the surge of Palestinians in Judea and Samaria who are participating in violence against the state. In coordination with the Shin Bet Security Service, the IDF has arrested members of 5 terror cells in the area within the past 4 months. According to intelligence reports, the groups were planning to abduct Israeli soldiers and civilians in plots planned to coincide with the anniversary of the release of more than 1,027 Palestinian terrorists in exchange for captured IDF soldier Gilad Shalit. Palestinian security forces have allegedly seized their efforts to curb violence and terrorist activities in their jurisdiction. Last month alone, there were more than 130 incidents of attacks or attempted attacks against Israelis.
The international community continues to become increasingly concerned over Syria's chemical weapons stockpile. The regime of Bashar al-Assad is said to hold the world's largest supply of chemical weapons, and recent intelligence reveals that the weapons are being prepared either for use against the rebel armies or for transfer to another party. In an interview with Fox News, Israel's ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren, said that Israel will not stand idly by and allow Syria to give the chemical weapons to Hezbollah. Oren added that Israel has a very clear red line about those weapons passing into the wrong hands.
In light of escalating protests in his country, Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi has made a new ruling empowering the nation's military. Egypt has been rocked with waves of protest against the Islamist leader's new constitution that was recently fast-tracked through parliament, which opposition groups say undermines basic human rights, along with those of women and religious minorities.
Google has launched the opening of its campus in Tel Aviv. The technology giant has moved into the Electra Tower in Tel Aviv and has designated the lobby as a center for entrepreneurs. The 16,000-square-foot campus has an area for events as well as a device lab that will allow entrepreneurs to use provided devices for their meetings. Google also announced the start of a new program called Launchpad, a sort of boot camp for startup companies. Google's managing director of Israel's Research and Development Center said, "We are aware of the huge talent that has turned Israel into the startup nation, and we are interested in the success of the next generation of entrepreneurs." He said Google's ongoing investment in Israel is proof of the extraordinary talent here.
Israel has made remarkable progress in the fundamental areas of education, according to the results of the 2011 Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study, as well as the International Reading Literacy Survey. Israeli students were found to have achieved the greatest improvement in scores out of 42 participating nations. Israel's Minister of Education, Gidon Sar, said that these improvements span all socioeconomic sectors and that Hebrew speakers ranked among the world's 10 leading countries and were 10th in science, 7th in math, and came in 2nd for reading.
Last week, Jews around the world celebrated Hanukkah. This holiday is the celebration of a miracle that God performed in Israel when the Greek Empire attempted to paganize the Jews by profaning the temple and outlawing Shabbat. In that day, a group of faithful Jews chose to fight for their freedom to worship the one true God, and in return, God was faithful and made the small Jewish army victorious over the Greek Empire. The temple was purified and Shabbat was again sanctified. Jews will light the last candle of Hanukkah tonight and remember that God's light will shine from Jerusalem forever.
And that concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
What makes the miracles of Jesus even more miraculous? Standing where they happened, in Israel. Come explore Jerusalem, where Jesus opened blind eyes. Visit the hills of Galilee, where Jesus fed the multitude. Stroll through Capernaum, where Jesus lived and taught and healed. To learn more about standing where it all happened in Israel, visit www.goisrael.com. Come visit Israel.
You'll never be the same.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in our beautiful rooftop studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is the International Development Director of Bridges for Peace, Cheryl Hauer. Cheryl, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Josh. It's a delight to be here.
Cheryl, tell us a little bit about what is the position of International Development Director of Bridges for Peace?
Well, I have the privilege of actually taking the message of Bridges for Peace and its unconditional love and support for Israel into the nations of the world. I'm responsible for developing the work of Bridges all across the globe.
You know, what nations are you working in right now? Because we've seen around the world Christians are standing with Israel, but is it as widespread as people are saying, or is it more American Christians, Western Christians?
Oh, it's very widespread actually. We have large functioning offices in Canada, but also in the UK, in South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and even Japan, where a very, very small percentage of the population is actually Christian, but it's a strongly Israel supporting population.
That's very interesting because, as you mentioned, only 1% of Japan is Christian. Why do you think they have the moral imperative to stand with Israel?
Well, I think it's because Japanese Christians take the Bible very, very seriously. And when they read the Bible and see that God says He has made an everlasting covenant with the Jewish people and that the Gentile nations should support the nation of Israel as God reestablishes it here in the land, they take that very, very seriously. And so Japan is actually our second largest giving nation in the world.
You know, we're seeing a real revival of Bible-believing Christianity around the world. In fact, in South America, it's the fastest growing religion if you add in all the denominations. Why do you think so many people are leaving mainstream Christianity and coming back to Bible-believing Christianity?
Well, I actually think it has a lot to do with the restoration of the nation of Israel. God made promises millennia ago, and as Christianity reads those promises in the book and then looks and sees that God fulfilling those promises in this day, it draws them into a deeper and more personal relationship with Him.
You know, Bridges for Peace is primarily a social organization helping the people of Israel, but you also get involved in a lot of advocacy projects, political initiatives. Why do you think it's so important to get involved on the other side of things, not just with social projects, but also in political advocacy programs?
Well, obviously, Israel needs Christian support on every level. And in all of our nations, we have advocacy activity, we do advocacy training, helping Christians to understand how they can be a voice. Because at Bridges for Peace, we believe that's part of the call on Christians in this day, is to be a voice for Israel. Israel hasn't always been the best at Hasbara, and we hope to come alongside, raise our voices, and help with that issue.
Cheryl, you're also a celebrated author. You've not just penned books, but also children's books. Why do you think it's so important to reach out to children?
Well, first of all, you know, when you attend our meetings around the world, you see a lot of gray heads. And we want to make sure that this message is passed on to the next generation. But we also believe that for a real understanding, a true understanding of what God is saying to Christians in the world today, we need to come to terms with His heart toward the nation and people of Israel. That's important for children as well as for adults.
You know, we're seeing in Africa, Asia, South America, a great awakening of Bible-believing Christians who are now standing with Israel. Where do you think the next front is? Where do you think we'll see more support from Israel around the world?
Well, I do think that we're seeing, for Bridges for Peace, we're seeing increased activity in Africa, in nations in Africa where we never would have expected it. And of course, we're seeing increasing activity in South America as well.
They're saying in Africa today that 18 heads of states are actually Bible-believing Christians.
Yes.
Do you think that will have effect on their nations vis-a-vis Israel, political relations?
Absolutely. If they are as truly Bible-believing Christians, it will definitely influence their policy making, I believe. And we are staunch believers in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, where God says He will bless those that bless Israel. So I believe as these nations come on board, blessing and supporting Israel, they're going to see tremendous blessing in their nations as well.
You know, there's a fear, even in the evangelical world, but people are beginning to start believing in replacement theology again. How would that impede the work of Bridges for Peace?
Well, many of our national offices would tell you actually that is an issue that they deal with every day. The unfortunate heresy that Christianity has replaced Israel in God's economy. It is a heresy. It is a very difficult issue. It's something that Bridges for Peace is committed to educating the church about.
Cheryl, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message would you have for our viewers?
Oh, I would tell you we are living in amazing days. Days when God is fulfilling prophecy at an incredible rate. And that prophecy all has to do with His love and His eternal covenant with this nation and this people. And as Bible-believing Christians, we have no opportunity but to get on board.
Thank you, Cheryl, for being on the show.
You're welcome.
And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, Shining Light from Israel.
Could it be that the events unfolding in the Middle East today are somehow mirrored in the Bible by the prophets of Israel? Now, you don't need to be an academic historian to see the repetitive cycles throughout Jewish history. The names and faces may change, but the underlying challenges we face remain the same as they have been since biblical times. Ma'aseh avot siman labanim. Our sages tell us that the lives of our fathers are a sign for their children. The lives of our ancestors written in Scripture are the blueprint for our own. At the time of the destruction of the temple 2,500 years ago, Israel was faced with two empires that sought their destruction. The first were the Babylonians. Their leader Nebuchadnezzar ravaged Jerusalem and destroyed the temple, murdering over 100,000 Jews and exiling the survivors to Babylonia. The first time Israel was faced with nuclear destruction was in 1981 with Iraq. Iraq is modern-day Babylon. Same place, same cities, same people. Amazingly, the leader of Iraq at that time, Saddam Hussein, pronounced himself as the reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar, conqueror of the Jews. As Saddam was building a nuclear bomb, he called the reactor Tammuz, the name of the month the walls of Jerusalem were breached during Nebuchadnezzar's siege of Jerusalem before the destruction. Hussein ordered that the ancient city of Ur in Babylon be restored. Like Nebuchadnezzar 2 millennia earlier, each new brick was inscribed, this time with Saddam's name. Saddam then embarked on a campaign of terror and conquest, first in Iran, then Kuwait. His ultimate dream was to recapture Jerusalem. Menachem Begin, Israel's prime minister at that time, was faced with destruction and subjugation by modern-day Babylon. He had no choice but to defend Israel from possible annihilation and destroyed the Iraqi nuclear reactor. The book of Daniel prophesies about the downfall of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. He was driven from mankind. He ate grass like an ox. His body was washed by the dew of heaven until his hair grew like eagle's feathers and his nails were like bird's claws. Could these events prophesied about 2,500 years ago be a sign of what's to come for our generation? With Babylon behind us in 2012, Israel now faces a new empire that seeks its destruction, Iran. Iran is modern-day Persia, whose leader Haman issued a decree sealed by the king to annihilate every Jew in the vast Persian Empire on one day, encompassing the entire Middle East and beyond. The stories of our ancestors will serve as signs for their descendants. The parallels between Haman and the president of Persia, Ahmadinejad of Iran, are undeniable. So much so that Prime Minister Netanyahu gave a gift to President Obama in March 2012. The Scroll of Esther, a modern-day Persian president that calls for the annihilation of all Jews, both young and old, children and women, in one day. How do you annihilate everyone in one day in 2012? The prophets of Israel gave us a blueprint, a structure. After victory over Babylon and Persia, a window of opportunity was opened to the world. God would usher in an era of peace and prosperity. There was potential for the world to enter into the Messianic era. That prophecy was given for every generation until the coming of Mashiach. It was given for our generation. Again, we faced Babylon. And now we face Persia. As Haman fell with God's help, so will Iran. It is finally time to heed the call of the prophets of Israel. Be strong and courageous. Return to Israel. Stand united with Israel. The time has come for unbridled multinational unity and faith. Faith in our cause, faith in our right to be free, faith that one day there will be peace, and most importantly, faith in God. As Hashem was with our fathers in those days, He will be with us in our time.
Shalom, I'm Ari Abramowitz speaking to you from the old city of Jerusalem. Jeremy and I, along with our entire team at thelandofisrael.com, have been pouring our hearts and souls into sharing the truth and beauty of Israel with the entire world. Now more than ever, as lies, distortions, and propaganda are plaguing our small Jewish state, it's critical that a voice of truth illuminates the darkness. Please partner with us in sharing the truth and beauty of Israel with the world.
כל העולם כולו גשר צמא.
Shalom from Jerusalem. My name's David Ben. We all know that famous verse in the Bible, God blesses those who bless Israel. But did you ever stop and think about what is the greatest thing I can bless Israel with? Obviously, the greatest thing in life isn't a new car or even a new house. The greatest thing in life is children. Yes, God blesses those who bless Israel. And yes, the greatest thing you can give Israel is more children. Find out how you can save a life in Israel and bring more children to Israel. Visit friendsofefrat.org and help save a life of a child in Israel.
Stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
This last year has been for the Christian Embassy a year of blessing. God opened incredible doors for us to reach out to the nation of Israel and to communicate hope and blessing to the Jewish people. It enabled us to show and to demonstrate them in a very practical way that Israel is not alone, but that there are millions of Christians all over the world which are standing with her in good times and in bad times.
Earlier this year, the ICEJ sponsored a gathering of evangelical leaders from Germany and Austria in Jerusalem to commemorate 70 years since the Wannsee Conference. The leaders had the opportunity to meet with prominent religious and political figures in Israel and gave testimony of their support for Israel by laying wreaths in Yad Vashem. On Yom HaShoah, the ICEJ participated in a national wreath-laying ceremony and affirmed our commitment to Israel by bringing a group of pastors and leaders to Yad Vashem to learn about the Holocaust.
We are here to be educated so that never again will these atrocities take place, so that we can be trained to be righteous among the nations, to know how to act in times where they're tested in coming days.
ICEJ staff members eagerly participated in various humanitarian projects around Israel. A new Holocaust museum was inaugurated by the ICEJ at our home for Holocaust survivors in Haifa. The city of Haifa recognized the work of the ICEJ by placing a street sign with the name of our organization. The ICEJ raised the funds to sponsor the first flight of B'nai Menashe from India to return to their ancestral homeland in Israel. ICEJ sponsored an outing and a luncheon where staff members showed their support to courageous young soldiers who are living in Israel on their own. ICEJ staff members set off on a 477-kilometer bike trek in order to raise funds for the Disabled Sports Center in Tel Aviv. The Arise Hands-On Summer Tour brought young Christians from around the world to learn about Israel and reach out to Israelis in need. The ICEJ partnered with the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus to present a special briefing to members of Israel's parliament on the current Islamist campaign of violence against Christians in sub-Saharan Africa. The 2012 Feast of Tabernacles celebration saw more than 5,000 Christians come to Jerusalem.
There are again Palestinian Arabs love Jesus and love Israel and standing for Jesus. Even we are paying a big price.
The event was characterized by its rich spiritual content and the unmistakable presence of the Lord that emboldened pilgrims' faith to expect more from God in the days ahead. The ICEJ activated our Israel in Crisis Fund to meet the urgent needs among the communities most impacted by the rocket attacks from Gaza.
As you have seen, the Lord opened exciting doors to the International Christian Embassy in this past year. And we also believe that this coming year, the year 2013, will become a year of blessing and will become a year of new open doors. And I want to invite you here from Jerusalem to stand with us in this crucial time in the history of Israel to demonstrate to them that there is hope, that there is future, and that there are people around them which support them and which love them. We are your embassy here in Jerusalem. May the Lord bless you out of Zion.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan Elrom.
And I'm Erin Viner, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all your Israel updates.